Testing audio for Cat's broadcast. Check 1, 2.
First time. meeting of the Monroe County Election Board. This is a scheduled hearing for potential election violations. I'm going to go over a couple housekeeping items first so that we're all on the same page on procedure that was voted on and affirmed the last meeting. So basically, anyone that plans to testify, which to my knowledge, we have 2 folks or potentially a couple more, but only during 2 sessions, Clerk Brown will administer the oath to them, and any person that comes up to the podium, we will be speaking here. Please just state your name and we'll go from there. In addition to that, I want to go over kind of the procedures that we have approved. Each person, starting with Mr. Fox, will have 7 minutes to state any case, facts, anything that he so wishes to do. Then the board will have opportunity to ask questions. Questioning will go in order of Clerk Brown, the good mayor, and then myself. And that is simply, I just felt it was respectful to have Clerk Brown go first. So that's it. And then we will go right into Mr. Wolfbender, present any case that he may have, facts associated with this, and then we will ask questions of him as well. I will read a short summary of why we're here and all that good stuff immediately after the oath. Everybody good with that? All right. Could we have those folks that plan to testify or speak, just stand up and come up here, just near the podium, please.
Go ahead and come up here, Steve, right there. Thank you so much. Will you both raise your right hand and repeat after me? Or actually, will you just say I do at the end? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give to the Monroe County Election Board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both for that. All right. On Tuesday, February 17th, 2023, Marissa Meador of the Indiana Daily Student published an article noting potential election law violations by candidate David Wolfbender. At the May 2nd, 2023 regular session of the Monroe County Election Board, Mr. William Ellis brought a formal complaint to the same effect. After deliberation, the election board found reason to believe an election violation occurred. Certified correspondence was directed to Mr. Wolfbender, his listed counsel at the time, and to the landlord of the property in question, Mr. Justin Fox, for consideration. The cited violations were Indiana Code 3:14.13 and Indiana Code 3:14.3.1.1. And today we're here to conduct a hearing on those violations in order to determine the board's action, if any. I would like to make a quick note that both Mr. Fox and Mr. Wolfbender are here by invitation without subpoena. And I think that's important to recognize and thank both of you for being here to answer our questions and potentially state your case. With that, Mr. Fox, both gentlemen, you have 7 minutes. We will be on a timer. If the board wishes to ask any questions during that 7 minutes, the time will be stopped and you will be allotted that time. I'm going to do my best not to interrupt anything. And then we will ask questions afterward. Yes.
Before Mr. Fox comes up, may I have a moment to
Absolutely.
relay something to the board? In the interest of transparency, before Mr. Fox comes to testify, I want to let you know that I spoke with Mr. Fox by telephone. I did not solicit this call. The call came to me where he essentially relayed the same things that you, Board Member Garletts, discussed in a previous meeting as to Mr. Bender not renting from him or had the intent to rent from him. And he at that time indicated he had not received the letter of invitation that the board issued to him. So I let him know the date of the hearing and the location. I relayed such to Attorney Molly Turner King. And she asked me to let the board know in the interest of transparency that we did speak. And we then spoke a couple of days ago to confirm the date and the location of the hearing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin Fox. I'm in charge of 304 East 16th Street in Bloomington, Indiana. I am here I brought the lease from last year, this current year and next year to just show that I don't know who this individual is. I wish him the best. I hope everything works out with everyone in city council and his position. Any questions you guys may have, I can help you out, but I don't have any knowledge of this person living at the house or planning to live at the house or ever has lived at that house.
That was the quickest 7 minutes I've ever had. Wonderful.
So, hi,
Hi.
just a quick question on in your lease, it provides an opportunity for tenants to sublease.
Yeah.
But it requires, approval of the landlord, if I read it right.
That's right.
Were you ever submitted a sublease for?
No, I was not. And I'll be honest, kids sometimes just do it upon themselves and I don't know about it. So I did call, and actually it's funny, when I called to check in on this, oh yeah, Justin, we do have someone staying here. Okay, what's their name? And I went through that with them. They should have gotten approval. It was not this individual that is subletting for the summer, but it does happen. And maybe he even called me to possibly talk about renting the house at some point. I don't know. Again, I don't want to say anything against him, but I'm just giving you the facts as far as the lease goes and who's lived there and who currently lives there and who's planning to live there next year.
Well, he pretty much answered the questions that I would have asked. No tenant of yours indicated to you that they had an intent or had engaged in an agreement with Mr. Bender.
I spoke with one or two of the three that are in their house now, and none of them knew this person, and they said they had conversations amongst themselves and didn't know him. But that's all I have as far as that.
Has that address been unoccupied in the last year or two, or has it been continuous?
It's been continually leased, yeah. Now, I have had signs out front just for website traffic and promoting some of our other properties, so it could have looked vacant because the sign was out front, but it's been full.
That's all I have.
How many tenants are allowed at that property?
I believe the occupancy load is 3.
And of the 3, you mentioned that you had a sublease. Those 3 had a sublease that you didn't know about after the fact.
So about 2 weeks ago, when talking with Miss Brown, I called just to double check to make sure there was no arrangement with Mr. Fender. And one of them said, hey, one of our guys is in Indianapolis this summer, and he did move in a friend. I reminded him that needed to be approved, and I double checked that it was not the person that we're here to talk about today.
Do you know the date that may have started?
Probably mid-May, early May. It was when the person that was there for the school year went home back to Indianapolis.
And so it was a sublease for an existing tenant, replacing an existing tenant, not an additional tenant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not over occupying.
And then at any time, did any of those 3 tenants in your conversations mention that there may be an additional tenant that isn't listed on the lease or this sublease that you didn't know about?
No.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
I don't have any other questions. Mr. Fox, the leases that you provided, there wasn't enough time for me to copy everything.
I can get them tomorrow or next week if you need them.
Or if you even can hang out here for a little bit. I got one lease copy,
Sure, I'll hang out.
but
Fine.
the other 2,
No problem.
I did not, and I'll be happy to get those as quickly as I
Perfect.
can. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Mr. Bender.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you today. I have a few things I'd just like to say. A few things I'd like to say. First, I sent a letter to this board at the beginning of April. I hope and I assume that letter has been distributed. I want to reiterate one thing from that letter, and then I just would like to make one statement, then I'm happy to take your questions. As I said in the letter, I welcome this hearing because it is an in-person public forum where I can apologize both to the members of this board and to its staff for my evasiveness over the first month or so of this process. It also is an opportunity for me to publicly apologize and express regret to the city and the residents of the 6th District for the chaos that this has caused. Today, I'll maintain that I didn't mean for any of that chaos to come about, but it doesn't matter in that respect. So I do apologize for that. I do want to just address a few things that we just heard from Mr. Fox. None of Mr. Fox's testimony is in dispute with what I have said. What I have said is that someone represented to me that they were a tenant at the property. I came to find out after I had signed all of the documents, including the sublease, which I have copies of today, including all forms that are required to get on the ballot. All of that was, I found out after all of those things were signed, that person is not listed on the documents that are submitted to the city to say who is living where. I have a copy of what I was sent in regards to that form that is submitted to the city. My sublessor's name is not on it. So that was when I became aware of the sublease's state being invalid. I also, by the way, found that out after this board received the initial complaint. That was when I received this photo of this file. Other than that, I'm happy to take your questions. My attorney, Ms. Chopra, is here via Zoom. She can answer any questions as regard to the legal questions of this case. I'm happy to answer any questions as to the facts.
Thank you so much. The first question that you referred to something that you do have. Is that something that the board could take a look at?
Absolutely. I have multiple copies of it. All right.
And so Mr. Fox would have never seen this?
I can't speak to that. I can't speak to what Mr. Fox has or hasn't seen. I never provided it to him. This was an agreement, informal agreement between, signed, but an informal agreement between me and a friend of mine, the address is listed at that property. This was an informal agreement between friends. I wanted a place to stay for the summer, and we drew up this document and it was signed. So the responsibility in terms of getting getting approval for the sublease, I expected that the person that I signed the sublease with was going to go and get that. If it was required at all, I didn't know it was required under the primary lease because I didn't have a copy of the primary lease, if that makes sense.
So this is what you have, and you would be comfortable with us showing this to Mr. Fox to ask if he had ever seen this before or recognizes this person?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, that was, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
For also just for what it's worth, I do want to just add this, because I have a copy of what was submitted to the city with Justin Fox's signature on it. I can confirm that the person listed as the sublessor on that sublease is not listed on that document, which is right here. So it clearly is not someone. It may be someone that Mr. Fox actually never came into contact with either. He said that he never knew anyone illegally subleasing during the school year. I was under the understanding that when I signed the sublease, that the person I signed it with was on the lease. So there must have been. I was unaware he wasn't on the primary lease. Mr. Fox may be unaware he was that he was living in the house, but it was represented to me as if he was.
Okay. The next few questions that I want to ask are about your candidacy. In what city council district did you live in on the night before you filed your candidacy paperwork?
I was still, I was at the 609 South Henderson address. I believe that's still in the 4th. I had done work ahead of time because I had planned to move into the 6th. And I obtained this sublease well before I had signed all the forms. We were doing that under, and Ms. Chopra can speak to the specific legal citations of this. But I had done some work under Indiana's election law in regards to students. And had read the rule about students can register to vote where they live when school is not in session. I had contacted a member of the Indiana Election Division in the hopes of just confirming that my view was right. They're not allowed to offer legal opinions. They can ask their questions. It reaffirmed my understanding of that statute. It's entirely possible that my understanding of that statute is wrong. But it certainly was never my intent to commit any sort of election fraud like crime. I mean, I had this understanding of what that statute meant. I obtained the sublease, and then I was going to be obtaining a full year lease in the 6th at a different address. And I did that based on like that part of the statute that I had read and then I had asked someone about, because I don't know a lot about this stuff. So I thought I was doing the right thing. It turns out there was a problem with the sublease afterward.
Okay. I'm going to veer from the questions I was going to ask you. And I just,
sorry.
My attorney looks like she wants to say.
Something changed with the audio settings. I cannot hear any longer. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but it began at the beginning of that question. I cannot hear.
we're getting a thumbs up from the IT department that they are addressing it. So can you hear us now? Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me, Ms. Chopra?
The audio on our side seems to be good, so it might be an issue with her end.
Are you able to message her to see if she can adjust volume or something? Are you able to hear us now, Ms. Chopra?
Can she hear me?
Are you able to hear us now?
Feels like 2020 again.
Would it make sense to have some type of intermission while we fix the audio?
She's gonna try to log out and log back in. We have other people saying they can hear fine.
Okay,
I'm happy to answer. I can try if it's not a legal
Well,
specific question.
I'll wait until your attorney, that wouldn't be fair to you, so I can wait until your attorney's back on and can hear it, the question.
I think it would make sense to take a break, and if
She's back on.
Okay. Are you able to hear us, Ms. Chopra?
Might try again. She was connecting to audio when you said that. Allison, can you hear me?
I will defer to the board for whatever is most appropriate. I would agree it's reminiscent of 2020.
I was just gonna say they're closed captions, so. And there's also an option to phone in.
I just texted her and asked her that it might be a good idea to log in via phone.
I logged out and logged back in and now I can hear you. I apologize.
Oh,
Thank you
okay.
for taking the
She
question.
can,
She can hear us.
you can hear.
Thumbs up.
Yes,
Good to
thank
go.
you. I apologize for that.
No worries. Okay, so I just kind of want to ask what I think is a common sense question, just to help me translate this. let's think about all the important things that happened to us. If you went to the doctor and you got tests and they were going to mail you your results
Sure.
and they asked you for where you live, would you interpret that to be where you were currently residing or where you intended to move?
I see what you're asking. I mean, anything where mail was being sent up until when I had planned to actually step foot in the new residence where I had the sublease, I would have put my mailing address at the 609 South Henderson location, which is also where I put for my voter registration, right?
Okay.
So there's a consistency there.
But we're going to your intent,
Sure.
and you said, or you agree with me that if a doctor was wanting to mail you results to your residence, would they want the residence at which you were laying your head or the place you intended to move to send you those results?
Could you repeat the question? Because those seem like two different
Yes.
things to me.
I'm just moving away from candidacy paperwork.
Sure.
Talking about any important thing that would be sent to what would be considered your residence. And that's just one example.
Sure.
A doctor sending you the results from a major test that you had in their office. When they're asking for your address for where you live,
Mhm.
would they be wanting the address where you currently reside or the address that you intended to move to send you those results in the mail?
Sure. I mean, I think anytime mail is sent, they'd want to get it as quickly to the person as possible, right? So I assume they would want to send it to the place where they're currently residing. To me, however, this doesn't look any different than, than a student, for example, who has a parent that lives in the state in a different city. I know plenty of students who receive mail at both their address when they're at school and not at school. Ms. Chopra can speak better to the legal perspective on that. But I failed. I don't see the connection. I guess is the.
I can keep going. So another important thing I would think would be your bank statements, what money's gone through your checking and your savings that
Sure.
you might not want your roommates to see, none of their business, things like that. So if you file for an account at a bank,
Sure.
and I'm just talking about Bloomington, I imagine that you might have another residence in another city, another state, et cetera. But so if you have opened an account at a bank here in Bloomington, and they want to be able to mail you bank statements or anything that would be your personal business, not the business of your roommates or anything that only you would want to open because it's your business.
Sure.
Would you think that the bank wanted to send the statements to where you currently reside or where you intend to reside?
Where they currently reside, right? Where they're residing at a current time. And in a situation like you just described, my guess is that I would change my address with the bank based on, where I am at any given
Right.
time.
And you wouldn't change until you actually moved there.
Sure. I mean, but I think, and Ms. Chopra can speak to this, the logistics of bank statements work different than the logistics of voter registration.
And
So-
I would be happy to jump in as his counsel and address that question, Ms. Brown, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, so Indiana Code 3557 establishes special rules governing the residency of students. And it says specifically that a student may register either of the following, but not both. A, the address where the student lives when the student attends the post-secondary educational institution, such as IU, where the student pursues the student's education. That would be the address that he lived at during the school year. Or B, the address where the student lives when the student is not attending the post-secondary educational institution, where the student pursues the student's education. So I understand the question, but it's not, the question that you're asking isn't the way that the law operates. The law allows a student to register at two different residences. They can actually have two different residences. In this case, Mr. Bender opted to register at option B, where he intended to reside in the summertime when he was not in school at IU, not taking classes. And so that's something that you can do in a forward-looking fashion.
Please, let me ask a question. Do you have any case law that's been tested?
No, there's, I've searched and searched and there is not case law on these, on this subject matter. Thank you for that question.
There is
Okay.
not, you're correct. And
Well-
I would like to add that that is an incredibly loose interpretation of that code. That code very
Are we here to-
clearly was put, please let me speak, was put in place for folks that live in Indiana, like myself, like Mr. Bender, who grew up in Crown Point, who grew up in Indianapolis, to register either at home where I live with my parents, my guardian, whoever that might be, outside of college, outside of when I'm attending post-secondary, which is any form of higher education. Not moving somewhere in the same city in the summer that you've never lived before. So again, you and I both know it's not been tested in any sort of case, that specific code. But I would like to believe that you also know that that does not read anything like what you just said.
I would completely disagree with you, sir. As an attorney,
Agree
I
to
think that
disagree.
you need, right, I think as an attorney, you need to look at the black letter language of the law. And there are many types of students. Some students don't go home to their parents. Some students, like I was a student, I had a husband and 2 children. And so to classify students as one type of person or one type of group, I think is a little misguided. But I think that when you sit there and you read this statute word for word, and you don't try to sit there and interpret it the way that you want to, I think it very clearly allows Mr. Bender to register where he intends to live when he is not taking classes. And in fact, he was intending to live there. This is a question of fact, and he has proven very clearly, all the evidence shows that he did intend to live at that address. He wholeheartedly believed that. And I disagree with your interpretation of a statute.
And that's,
If you read it, I think it's very clear that what he
yeah,
did.
that's totally,
was
you're right.
not
And I'm glad that neither of us are in a position to make that decision because we both could be wrong and it hasn't been tested in a court. So
May I add one non-legal perspective there? I mean, outside of the law, I had tried it because I couldn't, there was no, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to look to find case law. That's why I reached out to the Indiana Election Division to a member of that division to try and understand if like what that actually means. So I tried to take all the steps to make sure that I was in the right. I did it again after the interview with the Indiana Daily Student to assure a second time. And it reaffirmed my understanding of the law.
while we're on it, do either of you know why this provision was added to the original code? Because this was not part of the original code, speaking to post-secondary education and students. It was added later. Do either of you know the reason it was added?
I don't follow much of the Indiana State Legislature.
Okay. Ms. Chopra, do you? I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly as well.
It rhymes with Oprah, sir.
Okay.
Chopra. I am not going to guess the legislature's intent. I'm sure that there is a record of it. But
There is.
that's the way it was decided. I mean, that's the way they decided to write it.
Okay, thank you. I was just questioning if either of you knew that reason. You had a question?
I just have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Bender. First of all,
I'm sorry, I can't hear too.
Can the speaker make sure his microphone is on?
Sorry
please?
about that.
sorry, here we go. So just a couple of questions. Why is the name on this sublease redacted?
Oh, I was just trying to keep my friend's name out of the news. I'm happy to provide the name. I don't know if it's really necessary compared to like what it is.
Well,
asked,
if
but
some way you wanted to, verify the, I guess, veracity of this, it'd be
Sure.
good to know who to ask.
Sure. Yeah. The name on the lease would be Will Cinsaline. Yeah.
Will
Cinsaline.
Cinsaline,
Cinsaline.
Can you spell that?
Maybe not. Let me try and find it.
And does he still live in Bloomington or?
I'm unaware. I've not spoken with him since the summer ended, so I'm not sure where he would be right now.
What, when did you find out that this sublease was not legit?
So the story published February 17, I believe was said earlier. I was out of town. I returned and started looking at this the next Tuesday. I was kind of, I've never, I didn't know like where to even go from that point. So originally I thought that it was didn't get approval kind of situation. So by the time that this board had seen the original complaint, I received a call, I believe, from Mr. David Henry, where he told me that the complainant had spoken to the manager of the property, I believe. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. And at that point, I was also at some point in that process advised to get an attorney after I got the first attorney.
But did you talk to this gentleman?
We had spoke, I don't remember the specifics of like whether or not we had spoken. I tend to believe that I may have seen him.
And I'm sorry, if I heard you right at the beginning, this was a friend of yours?
Yeah. We're involved in a campus organization together.
But I'm just speaking for myself. I guess I would like read that IDS story, pick up the phone and call my friend and say, WTF, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did. There are a couple of records of me calling him. I don't remember the specifics of the conversation. I do know that we had spoken before I had asked him to see a copy. I had asked him to see a copy of the primary lease of the property. He said he didn't have one on him. It was not until after I obtained the first attorney that
So this is sometime in February?
It would have been sometime either at the end of February or the early days of March. That was when I knew for sure. And at that point, my initial thought was change the voter registration right away. Back to 609 South Henderson for two reasons. One, it would have allowed me to vote in that election cycle because it would have been before the deadline. And I would have just sent I wouldn't have been able to officially withdraw at that point because it would have been past the deadline, but I would have withdrawn. Then the first attorney I had explicitly told me not to change my voter registration back, concerned about optics. So I followed the 20-year-old followed the partner at the law firm.
Where do you live now?
Where am I right now? So right now, I haven't been in Bloomington since the school year ended. I was on vacation in Nashville and in California. My brother graduates from high school this weekend. My hope is to return to Bloomington at a new lease property sometime next week, sometime mid next week. And there's a new lease. But I haven't changed my voter registration to that address because I don't want to do it until I actually move it.
So that the new lease is obviously in the 6th district.
Yes.
And when's it start?
It started, I believe, May 1. Correct. Yeah.
The day before the primary election.
The primary election was on May 2nd.
May
Yes.
2nd.
So yes.
Okay.
I believe that's the case. Yeah.
We have
I mean, it's
copies
in
of
writing.
that.
Sorry.
May we have copies of that as well, please?
Sure.
So when you originally made the sublease, that turned out not to be a legit sublease, were you planning to move there in May
Sorry. Was I planning to move where?
to?
The sublease location.
Yes.
Yeah, it was my plan right after finals ended to be there during the summer when, I had no reason to. I mean, like, so for example, like if I wasn't going to be in the city or the state because I was on vacation, I wouldn't have obviously been there, but it was my intent to create a residence there and be there for the summer.
So I know that your letter to the board, and then even today, you've said you sought guidance from the Indiana Election Division.
Correct.
And we were able to ask Mr. Kochivar questions regarding
Sure.
his conversations with you. But also, the Indiana Election Division published a 2023 Indiana Candidates Guide that they made available on their website.
Sure.
Are you familiar with that?
Only for the campaign finance paperwork
Okay,
sections.
okay. Well, one of the things that is in there, it's under a section referred to as City Common Council, which is the race that you were on the ballot for. And it talks about residency. And it talks about a candidate for membership for the Common Council must have resided in the city for at least 1 year and have resided in the district in which they were seeking election for at least 6 months before the election. We just agreed that the election was May 2nd.
Correct.
6 months prior to that would have been roughly November 2nd.
I have been advised that that statute refers to the general election, which would put the 6 months prior date after the primary election. So I don't believe, I've been advised that that's not the correct reading.
Okay, so
I could, if I'm wrong about that, I
Okay.
profoundly apologize and I'll drop that right
let
away.
me tell you
This is Jeff.
that I specifically, one of the questions that I specifically asked Mr. Kochivar was, do you need to live in the district you are running for before you file for candidacy or before the filing period ends for declaring candidacy? So candidacy, the filing period ended February 3rd. And his response to my question was, I refer you to page 3738 for the summary of the qualifications to run, meaning file
Sure.
candidacy. Would you agree with that? To
Sorry,
run, would you agree that to run for an office means you're filing candidacy? That's
of course, yes.
okay. So, and it is on page, it says 3738, but it looks like it really started on 36. Let's just give Mr.
I'll give you the benefit of the
Let's give him a
doubt.
buy on that one, saying that a candidate must have resided in the city for at least 1 year. And it doesn't sound like you weren't living in the city, but there's the and. And the and says have resided in the district in which you are seeking election. You couldn't get to the general without the primary. Would you agree with that?
Well, of course.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with my client here. I think when you read most of 314.3, that running for election for purposes of that chapter means the general election, not the primary. I don't think that Mr. Kochivar even answered that question.
I was told by multiple people that the two things that had to be the case were you had to be an active voter in the district, and it was 6 months prior to the November general election. If I am wrong about that, then I will drop out immediately, and that I surely don't deserve this office at all.
Can I ask a question? Because I think it's really easy to, seems like there's two issues at play at the same time. And one relates to qualifications to be on the ballot. And there's a question, as I understand what's before us, is whether or not we make some kind of determination that there was a potential violation of the laws that relates to fraudulent filings.
Mhm.
I think today what we're focused on, I think, is the latter. And so, whether or not Mr. Bender is legit in terms of his residency for being a qualified candidate, that's for someone else at a different time. And what we're really, I think, supposed to be focused on is, do we think that there's enough of a question here around a fraudulent filing, which would relate to singularly, was he registered to vote within the district? And if we think that there's a big enough question there, our only job is to refer this to the prosecutor's office for them to make a determination, not for us to make that determination, because there's a lot of other evidentiary stuff that would have to be sorted out. The question of, are you a qualified candidate? That's going to be, something that I believe the Monroe County Democratic Party chair would have to file some objection, and that would kick off a totally different process than this one. Am I framing this right for my board
Yes.
members? I'm kind of the new guy, so maybe you already
If I
talked about.
could, Mr. Fernandez, I do agree with your assessment of what we're here for today and how things move forward.
I can be done for now.
All right, I have a series of questions.
Sure.
But admittedly, my list did not get shorter. It got longer during the last few minutes. The lease that you provided us, this sublease.
Yeah.
Okay, with your friend.
Yeah.
Initials WS.
Yeah.
Not on the primary lease. You know that, correct?
Correct. I know that now.
Okay. So after we're done, I would prefer to bring Mr. Fox back up, because I need to know kind of how that all transpired and what that was, because now I know who this Will is. But what I would like to, there's a couple things I would like to make a comment, and I do have a question. You said this was an informal agreement. Well, a signed lease is not an informal agreement, just to be clear. And then is it your belief that you were the sublessor of the sublessor that Mr. Fox noted?
I can't speak to whether or not I'm the sub. I don't know the identity of the sublessor he identified. So I can't speak to that. I believed that I signed a sublease with someone who was on the primary lease of the property. And then that turned out to not be true. But that happened after I had signed everything.
And when did you find that out again? I know you already stated that, but when did you find out that the lease wasn't valid, the sublease?
I received the copy of what was submitted to the city either at the tail end of January or of February, excuse me, or the very beginning of March. I don't remember the specific date.
So let's say it's the very beginning of March.
Sure.
Okay, give you the benefit of the doubt. It was a little bit later. You signed a document a month and a half later, a CFA 4, that stated that you were still a candidate at that address.
So my understanding of the CFA 4, which I thought I had with me, the address that include the 304 East 16th Street address is, to my eyes, not on that document at all.
It's irrelevant. You cannot be a candidate in a district if you don't have a residence there. You signed your residence there. Okay, you had intent to live there. You signed a document under penalties of perjury that is at the very bottom of that document. You cannot be a candidate in the 6th district and not have an address in the 6th district. So that's irrelevant. That's just your mailing address. We've already established, not in a court of law, but just by common sense, that anybody can have a mailing address anywhere they want.
Sure, but
It's not technically.
No.
You signed a document a month and a half after, correct? That's all I'm asking.
I signed the CFA 4, but at that time, I had not withdrawn from the, I guess what would have been my other option? I had to file the CFA 4 no matter what, right? That would have been I would have been right here in front of the Monroe County Election Board, another meeting, if I hadn't turned in the CFA 4. What would have been the outlet? I signed here that on the CFA 4 that I was still a candidate in the race, and I had not withdrawn from that race. Even if I had withdrawn, I still think I would have had to fill this out, or I would have had to fill out another form that closes the committees. I don't know if I had another outlet. I don't know if that, Ms. Sharper might have a better legal perspective than I do. But I don't know, I guess, I'm in over my head on this stuff, but I don't know what else I could have done with the
Well, I
CFA.
would first say that the CFA 4 is not in question. That's not the issue that we're here on today. We were never noticed that there was a problem with the CFA form and that we would need to present any evidence or discuss that today. So I don't know that that's appropriate to discuss it at this point.
With all due respect, I'll decide what I want to ask and what's appropriate. We're here for a matter when what I believe it is. Okay, I'm a board member here. I'm not a judge. I'm not an attorney. I'm here to decide whether or not this needs to go somewhere else. So all
I
information,
understand, sir, but he should be
Please
afforded
don't
due
interrupt.
process. He
I'm
does
here
get due
to ask
process.
information so that I can make a well-educated decision on whether or not I need to refer this young man to something that may affect him the rest of his life. So to me, signing a document 6 weeks after you were notified or you knew that that lease was invalid, to answer your question, David, there were 1,000 things that you could have done other than stay silent. Okay, that's how I could answer your question. All right, and I'm not going to judge you on why you did or did not make that decision. I just want you to know why I'm scratching my head, because it's a very linear question. You said you were notified or knew at the beginning of March that the lease was not valid. You signed a document 6 weeks later, approximately, that was stating that you were still a candidate. You could have done 1,000 things, okay? I'm not here to debate that, but the answer is you could have done 1,000 things other than stay silent.
What is one of the 1,000 things? Because genuinely, I'd love to, I mean,
You could have came to the board and said, I made an honest mistake. I have no idea what's going on. You could have gone to the clerk's office. I mean, there's 2 of 1,000. So there's 998 left.
sure, I guess what I would have,
You know what, I'm gonna go ahead and ask my client not to answer any questions. He does have that right. As to the CFA 4, again, he did the
Wonderful.
order process, and he should not be in a position where he's answering questions.
I don't
about
have
a
any questions on
document that
the
has not
CFA
been
4.
noticed as a problem.
Where were you going on February 17th? Where were you moving?
Statutes that he is.
I apologize. I thought you were done.
Thank
My
you.
apologies. There was a
Go
lag
ahead.
in
I just
technology.
want to make sure. Go ahead.
sorry, I don't know what just happened.
Ms. Chopra, are you done? I apologize. There was a lag in technology. I didn't know that you were still speaking.
I am, sir. Thank you.
Where were you moving on February 17th?
Where was I planning to move? Is that the question?
No, where were you in the process of moving?
Oh, I was still, I mean, as of the 17th, before I knew where the state of the sublease, I was still in the process of moving to 304 East 16th Street.
But your lease didn't start till May 1st.
So when you move into a residence, I guess I'm confused that when you,
You told the IDS that you were in the process, and I quote, of
Yeah.
moving when Marissa called you.
which was true. I mean, in terms of the fact that like there were books in my apartment that were in boxes. There were items in my apartment that were in boxes. I mean,
So you weren't actually going anywhere at that time.
I mean, I wasn't driving the car, if there's an analogy there. But I had plans to be in this new residence where I signed the sublease after school had ended.
Okay. I don't need to know their names. I know their names. I believe you should know their names. But do you know the names of the 3 residents that live at 304 currently?
I have their names.
Did you know their names?
No, I did not.
So you are standing here and you are telling me that you are going to move in with 3 gentlemen. I'm assuming gentlemen, I apologize, 3 people,
Sure.
3 human beings that you don't know their names, you've never met. And you're going to live with them.
For 3 months was the, yeah. And
Okay.
May, June, yeah. I mean, I was under the understanding, I think, when I signed the sublease that, you know, I just assumed, you know, this guy has a room in this house that I could take his room for a few months. That was my understanding when I signed the sublease. I mean, turns out later that wasn't true, but I had a genuine belief that it was. So yeah,
Where were you going on August 2nd?
August 2nd, 2024. Like after the,
2023.
sorry, 2023, excuse me, my bad. I had already started the process of finding a lease agreement for the 2023-2024 academic year that was in the district at a different address.
Okay. How do you, in your letter to us, you said that you have the belief, this is and I respect that, it's a common thread here, that you have a belief that you've resolved all of your voter/candidacy issues at this time. How do you believe that's been done?
So in regards to in regards to the residency question, and granted, I should have been more careful in my writing there. After the voter registration address is changed, I believe that will be the case. I have not yet changed the voter registration address because I want to be extra careful and not do it until I actually step foot like for the summer to live in the property. So I think at that point that would solve the core of the residency question. Because, you know, if one lease turned out to not be it just turned out to not work, I suppose. It's invalid. I was able to find another place where I could define residency. Now, if there's a problem with the residency, then I'm happy to have a conversation about that. But I don't think like that's a question more of like, am I eligible to stand on the ballot than like, and there are honest questions, like even with like the question of, you know, the Title 3557 or Code 355, whatever it's referred to. I mean, even if our understanding is wrong, and I don't think it is, based on my conversations with Mr. Kochevar, but even if it's wrong, I certainly didn't mean to do anything wrong. I certainly, like when I changed the voter registration, I genuinely had the belief that that was a valid change in registration. I had the belief it was valid when I signed all of the forms. So I certainly never had any intent at all to commit any crime under Indiana code.
So thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is that in your letter to us,
Sure.
you spoke in the present tense that the issues had been rectified in your mind, but you actually meant the future tense, that you wish to, or you will rectify these issues.
Yeah, I probably should have been a little more careful in my wording. I apologize for that.
That's okay. Can you explain to me how you feel that you would rectify it? Or perhaps Ms. Schoper should do that. How can you rectify a voter registration and a candidacy registration filing in a district at an address that you don't have at the deadline, regardless of whether that sublease or lease was legal or not? How do you feel, either of you, that can be rectified today or in the near future, to be clear?
Ms. Sharp, if you have something you'd like to add on this,
I can. I think that you've kind of answered that in your last reply, but the fact of the matter is that Mr. Bender intended through his actions to live in the 6th district during that course of time in which he was not a student at IU. And the facts are that he will actually be doing that. And so to rectify that, he would just need to register with the address in the 6th district where he has the lease now that he is confident is valid. He's met with the landlord himself to make sure it's a good lease this time around. So that's how you rectify it. I mean, the fact is that he is in fact eligible to run in the 6th district, because regardless of his misunderstanding back in January, February, the truth is, and the fact is that he will be living in that district over the summer when he's not enrolled.
Mr. Garlitz, if I could add something to that. There certainly is a conversation to be had about whether or not that would satisfy the legal requirements to stay on the ballot. And I'm happy to have that conversation with this board in a public or private setting. Like, that's a completely valid question. But it does seem to me to be independent from the idea that that somehow I knowingly signed something I shouldn't have, because I really didn't mean to do that. It seems to me to be an independent question.
Yeah.
So I took the liberty of looking up cases in Indiana. And again, we have those the responses from Mr. Kochevar. First, I believe you two also were given a copy of his response, and how I understood it, please correct me if you understood it differently, is that he did not give you direct advice confirming that what you were doing was right. He said something to the effect of, it is up to the candidate to determine if he meets those qualifications.
May I address that? Or I mean, I suppose, I mean, maybe I wasn't sure if you were finished there.
Well, can I finish?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
So this is about a school board race in Vigo County. I understand that's not your race, but it kind of says exactly what Mr. Kochivar relayed in his
Mhm.
response. This candidate, looked at the candidate guide that we talked about from the Indiana Election Division, talking about having lived in the district, you're going to be elected for at least 1 year before the election. Similarly, this candidate, it was too late for that candidate to withdraw. And that particular county clerk called the state and was told it was up to the state to file in the proper district. The clerk's office cannot refuse the filing, but then if the candidate should win, they would not be able to hold the position. So similarly to what happened here in Monroe County, you remained on the ballot, even though you did not meet the residency requirements on the day that you filed. I'm just a person who's trying to understand this from a common sense perspective. How would you understand the needs of a district where you intended to live, but you did not live?
Sure. So two separate parts to that. The first part about Mr. Kochivar's, my conversations with him. As I said earlier, IED officials are not allowed to give legal advice. He was not my lawyer. I asked specific pointed questions about this specific instance, excuse me. And the answers to the questions reaffirmed my understanding. So I don't want to paint it as he gave me advice. I want to paint it as I asked specific questions about election law, and his answers helped me come to the conclusion that what I was doing was okay. So I sought out help essentially in regards to questions. And the second part of your question, how do I understand the needs of a district where I intend to live? Or I would say that this district, and this doesn't matter from a legal perspective, it's just from the perspective we're in, this district is so heavy on, in terms of demographics, on people who live my day-to-day life. If the question that this board wants to consider is where would I understand the issues of the district, I certainly understand the issues of the 6th district way better than I understand the issues of the 4th. I don't think that's a good argument to make. I'm not making that argument, but if that is the conversation, the 6th district, we don't have an actual number because we have to kind of make guesses, but we can feel pretty confident saying that it's majority student. And it's majority people who do what I do every morning, which is get up, walk to class, and live like a student does. So if that's the question, we certainly have an answer there. It's not, I don't think it makes much of a difference. In regards also to, what you were saying about residency in general, you brought up this Vigo County case, which I of course haven't heard of, but I respect its case law on this. That if there are questions about how there are questions of like eligibility to take office. Those are completely valid questions. I just want to do our best to really try and separate it between eligibility to run for office and intent to commit a crime. Because there are certainly very valid conversations to have in regards to eligibility, and we should have those conversations, no matter what forum they're in. But in terms of like intent to commit a crime, I feel very confident saying I surely didn't mean to do that. I surely had no desire to commit any kind of Indiana election law crime. I'm interested in going to law school. It would be a really, really terrible application to submit with a voter fraud charge. Certainly had no intent on doing that at all.
I want to apologize. And Ms. Chopra, which form are we not allowed to discuss?
Well, I was just requesting that we not talk about the CFA 4 that was mentioned.
So I could ask a question about the CAN 42, which is the
That was filed in January or February.
yes, January, I believe it was signed.
I think that's up for grabs. Yes, clerk.
Okay. Do you mind, Mr. Bender?
Sorry, the CAN 42.
CAN 42,
I'm pulling
which
that up
is the
now.
Declaration of Candidacy for Municipal Primary Nomination in 2023.
Yes,
Okay. So, and would you agree that you did sign that? It was filed in my office on January 31st at 10:07 a.m. Would you agree that that's your signature?
that is.
Okay. Can you go follow me on the first page to the box? Where it says residency information.
Right.
And the question number 5, can you read question number 5 and what you responded?
Yeah, I said my complete residence address is 304 East 16th Street, Bloomington, Indiana, 47408. My thought process there is that that's where you would put your voter registration address. Residency in Indiana is determined on voter registration. So that it would make sense there to put a voter registration address where it says where you're a resident.
So you had already addressed the registration where you were registered in the top part where you say, I am a registered voter of precinct 3 in the township of Bloomington. Agreed? That's what you said in the first part.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're
Okay.
looking at. Yes.
So they are no longer asking about your voter registration. They're asking about your residency. When they say my complete residence address is, it doesn't say will be, it says is, correct?
Yeah, I think we just have a difference in like, I understood that to mean, that's where you put your voter registration address. When I filled that out, if I filled that out accidentally, or if I misunderstood that, I'm happy to address that, but I certainly expected that to mean where, your voter registration is. Residency in Indiana law, when I looked at it, and granted, again, there's so much here I don't understand in regards to the law because I'm not a lawyer. But when they talk about residency, they're referring to a voter registration address. So it made sense to me that's where I would put my voter registration address. And that's
So when they talk about residency, it is a declaration of candidacy. That's what it says at the very top of the page. It does not say verification of voter address. It is a declaration of candidacy, and you are saying your residence is, not will be, you're saying is. And I really had hoped that we wouldn't get into semantics because there are just some words that need no explanation. Is different from will be or intend to be. Would you agree?
Yeah, I certainly agree that is part. It's the residence address that I'm having a hard time with. I understood that to mean voter registration address. I'm not actually entirely certain. I feel pretty comfortable that was certainly the intent of the form. So I think I think we have a difference in opinion of what residence address meant. I think it's certainly valid for someone to understand that as voter registration address, considering that that is the address that is used to determine residency. So I don't think it's entirely abnormal.
And if I could, clerk, chime in and refer back to 3557 with the special rules governing residency for those that are in a post-secondary school, it uses the word residency. And so if he can claim residency where he's currently sleeping at night or where he's going to be sleeping or where he does sleep at night when he's not in school, it would make sense that he could say that that's his residence if that's where he lives when he's not in school. I guess you can analogize this because I know that we've been wanting to do that with people who do go home to their parents' home. Let's say, I'm from Indianapolis, but I go to school at IU. I really like to vote in Marion County. And I've been living with my parents for 19 years at a certain address. But during the school year at some point, they change their address. It's still in Marion County. And they're going to be changing it when it's time to vote in the summer, but they don't live there yet. You can still say that's my residency under that code. Does that make sense?
Oops, sorry.
And so when you look at that's where you define what residency means for the purposes, I believe, of that form.
I do think like in regards to in regards to this part 5 here, if there's a problem with that, I'm happy to address it. But in terms of like, if I did it incorrectly, I'm happy to try and fix it. But I certainly didn't mean for it to be wrong. I certainly totally understood that was supposed to be voter registration address, which is why I put it down there.
It feels to me, and I train under Mr. Kochivar, there's an election administration conference every year for the next year's election. And the books that we get that are like the Bibles of election, and where
Sure.
we go to and refer when we are in doubt or in question, and we can also call the Indiana Election Division. It feels to me that those read very specifically for a reason, so that when you are a candidate, it is very clear on what they are asking for. It seems to me, and I am just one of 3, it seems to me that if there were exemptions for filing candidacy, it would say something like the residents residing in the district where you are filing candidacy, unless you're an IU student whose parents live in Indianapolis and you live in Bloomington. It seems like it would spell that out so that we would not be unclear. Because right now, based on what you're saying, and I am not questioning your intent, I am not here to judge you. My colleague has very astutely pointed out this is not a courtroom. But what is to prevent right now someone who lives in Ellettsville, Indiana,
Sure.
which is a part of Monroe County, from having filed to be a candidate in the 6th district when they do not live in the 6th district?
I can address that. The rules governing non-students are very different from the rules that govern students. This is a specific, you talk about an exemption for students. This is a specific exemption for students. They're governed by a whole different set of residency rules. So that suggestion would not work under Indiana law right now, nor should it. And again, if there's a question of interpretation in regards to 3557 that we interpret wrong, and I really don't think we have, but if we have, that's an entirely different question than, I came in filing this form. I knew that when I wrote down 304 East 16th Street, that somehow, that wasn't a valid registration address. I think that is the, in terms of you're not trying to judge intent here. I mean, that's kind of, I think, based on the letter I received from this board, that the law actually explicitly suggests you should look at intent. That's the law says that for it to be considered a crime under these statutes, that I need to have knowingly filed these incorrectly. And I really didn't. I don't really think it's that far out there to suggest that, when they say residence, especially considering in Indiana law, they use residence to mean voter registration address. I don't think that's such a far hop. It's also under Indiana law. It's also they use this in other areas. So for example, not that this is the case with me, but our Secretary of State can tell you, because he's broken it himself, that if you take a homestead tax deduction, you have to make that your voter registration address. So they're tying residency directly to voter registration address. So they're related. I don't think it's an entirely if I got that wrong, I certainly didn't mean to get that wrong, but I don't think it's entirely out of line to consider that that's what they meant when they said residence, the voter registration address. So I mean, if I misunderstood that, I will come into your office tomorrow and fix it. Well, tomorrow my brother graduates, so maybe in the afternoon. But I I certainly did not intend for that to be, to mess that up. I mean, I best it was a mistake that I'm happy to fix.
If I could jump in here, Mr. Fernandez summed up what we're here for today very well. And it's whether or not whether or not you think that a violation occurred. And I think that earlier, Mr. Chair mentioned that it was determined that a violation occurred. I don't know that that is actually the case. I think I would appreciate you clearing that up because no violation has been found to occur. We're not here to quote, sentence Mr. Bender. This is really more an evidentiary hearing. But what we're looking at is criminal laws here. And Indiana 314-113, 314-311, which are the ones that we're looking at, read as follows. I'm going to read them out loud. A person who knowingly files a report required by IC 39 that is fraudulent commits a level 6 felony. A person who knowingly, and then 1311 says that a person who knowingly does any of the following commits a level 6 felony. 1, procures or submits a voter registration application. Here's the important part. Known by the person to be material, false, fictitious, or fraudulent, or procures, casts, or tabulates a ballot known by the person to be materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent. I don't, as a former prosecutor, and I know Ms. King is a former prosecutor, so I hope that you take her interpretation of these two criminal codes. I don't know what they are, but I think that she knows how to interpret criminal codes really well. I don't think any prosecutor would be interested in filing a case and trying to prove that Mr. Bender knew what he was doing was false when he knowingly filed the forms. He certainly knowingly filed the forms. He knew that he was filing the forms, but I don't think that you could ever prove, and the evidence doesn't show, that he knew that they were materially false or fictitious. Could he have made a mistake? Maybe. I don't think he's even saying that he made a mistake. I think he thought that he was doing the correct thing. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Should this issue be referred to the prosecutor? And I just don't, when you look at the criminal laws that you're looking at today, you all know that you don't have the ability to decide whether or not Mr. Bender committed these crimes, these level 6 felonies. A prosecutor does. But I don't think that there's even enough evidence to forward to the prosecutor. I'm just saying that now because I'm actually needed in another courtroom. So if I get snagged, I wanted to make sure that I made that point really clear. And I do feel like we're kind of running in circles at this point. Thank you.
May I add on to that? If there are any mistakes on any forms or with any eligibility problem, I will do anything to try and fix them. If they can't be fixed, then I'll leave the race. Like that's how serious I am about making sure this is all right. Like I really didn't mean for anything to go wrong here. Part of the reason why I tried to withdraw the first time, and we haven't talked about that, but I was supposed to withdraw before this investigation even started. It didn't turn out that way due to a mistake with the law firm. But part of the reason I dropped out is I didn't think there was any way that I could make an argument that I had a valid residence in the district because I didn't have this other lease. So there was no way to rectify what had happened. Things have changed, but if there are still issues with eligibility, I'll do anything to fix them. If they're not fixable under Indiana law, then I'll leave the race. That's a public commitment I'll make because I'm not trying to do anything wrong here.
Any other questions?
I don't have any more questions, but I think that we ought to just, make a decision and so we can move the process forward. I mean, I think, Ms. Chopra totally summarized my point of view perfectly well. And that I do think it is a question of, I don't have any predisposition about what a prosecutor might or might not do. That is legit. I mean, I have an opinion, but I don't think my opinion really matters. at the end of the day, it's kind of the prosecutor's office. And it just seems to me that, getting to the essence of knowingly, which really is the key thing, I don't think we have the capacity to make that judgment. I mean, I've never met Mr. Bender before. I don't know any. I think that some of the actual stuff that's been expressed, I mean, it gives me pause. I just think we ought to, frankly, just move this process along and without any kind of prejudice, one way or another, go ahead and recommend this over to the prosecutor's office so that they can make that judgment and let this young man get on with his life if that's the determination. But I don't think we can make that judgment today. I mean, for me, I would want to interview the person who was your friend that gave you this bogus sublease and validate and verify, timelines, communications, all that kind of stuff before I could make a judgment as to whether or not someone knowingly did something or not. We don't have the capacity to do that. So why don't we just move on and let them make a decision? Hopefully they make it in a very quick manner so that we can let the process go forward as to whether or not, the District 6 is going to have a representative or not. But I just think we ought to get on with it.
Is that a motion?
It is.
Is there a second?
I will second.
And just to reiterate, I'm not making any prejudice. I'm not making any judgment, Mr. Bender, one way or another. I just think that we're not the body that's going to be able to effectively make that decision.
Any discussion from either member? Because I do have some discussion and potentially an amendment to the motion. I could not agree with you more. I think that at this point, there are more questions that we can't answer, no matter how long we sit here. And whether I believe you or not is truly irrelevant in terms of it's not for us to make that decision. I believe that there has to be someone else with other avenues to find out the answers, and that's not us. That said, what I do believe with every ounce of my being is that you are not a legal candidate. And so I would like to potentially either amend the motion or add to the motion that we also refer this to the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has the capacity to seek injunction for your candidacy. And that is something that I think would be important, and to let that office make that decision. They can, to my knowledge, it is my understanding that they can't do anything on the criminal side, but they can take care of the potential unverifiable candidacy, or whatever the word is that you'd like to use. So I'd like to refer to both of those offices, if that is acceptable, and let those folks make that decision from there. That's my discussion. If anybody's willing to amend or rescind or.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm personally not comfortable doing that because I haven't really researched that issue. So I don't know, I don't think it's up to the board to challenge the credentials. That's up to, at this stage of the game, that's kind of up to the Monroe County Democratic Party chair, whether they want to take some action. So I would leave it to them and just keep this simple to this main issue, because if that's kind of the crux of the issue in terms of legitimacy. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I haven't really looked at that
So
part of the law.
We have a motion and a second. I will just add that. I'll just add an additional motion then after, and we'll play it out. And I
Appreciate
full
that.
well respect that you don't pick up doing that. So motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. This matter is to be referred to the Monroe County Prosecutor.
And just for the record, it was at a 3-0 vote.
3-0. Sorry, we don't have our normal roll caller, so I'm doing it the old school way. And then I would like to make a motion to also refer this to the Attorney General for potential, with the recommendation to seek this out in terms of investigation as they see fit, much like the prosecutor.
I will second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed.
Nay.
So that is 2-1. And motion passes. Okay, thank you all for your time today. Thank you very much for coming. I do want to reiterate, I very much respect and appreciate you coming on an invitation basis. And thank you, Mr. Fox, for your time as well. And everybody enjoy the day. This motion or this hearing is adjourned.